Good morning, Mr. Chair. I think we're set. If you're ready, you can start.
Ready. Call the meeting to order.
Excuse me, through the chair, can you turn your microphone on?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, two mics. Call the meeting to order. This is Tuesday, May 7th, 2024 at 10 a.m. Roll call.
Good morning. Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark? Ms. Zimmerman? Ms. Brown? Mr. Harrell? Ms. Lopes? Here. Mr. Hofstall?
Here.
Mr. Savage? Mr. Rios?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Austin Tibbetts? Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Ms. Deming? Mr. Sanchez?
Here.
Ms. Nebeker? Mr. DeHart?
Here.
Ms. Holmes? Here. Mr. Liba? Ms. Bigby? Here. Ms. Agers? Here. Mr. Tristo?
Here.
Ms. Fast?
Here.
Mr. Cryer? Mr. Crump? Ms. Morrow? Ms. Matthews? Here. Mr. Troost?
Here.
Mr. Delgadillo?
Here.
Mr. Cantu?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. Maderos?
Here.
Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. Brian?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, move on to minutes of April 2nd.
Through the chair,
Anybody in the
Parks
desk still have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. On item number 9 of the minutes, on the election for your chairmanship, it doesn't indicate that I voted yes or no or 0, but I was here and I was next to you and I voted for you.
I verify that. So you would like that corrected?
Yes.
Thank you. Anybody else here, Modesto? Okay,
Mr. Chair, if I could, just for clarification purposes, the minutes are of April 2nd. I just want to try to make sure I'm tracking the item that was raised. I don't see that reflected in these minutes. If I could just maybe get some clarification from the member as to which month perhaps is being referred to.
Jose.
I stand corrected.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we got it right. I appreciate that.
That was a test, so Mary, you passed.
I've got my coffee right here. Thank you.
All right. Bakersfield, any comments on the minutes? Fresno?
This is Les
Go ahead.
Clark. Just wanted to let you know I'm here and accounted for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I'll account that.
Anybody else in Bakersfield? Fresno? If not, we need a motion and a second to approve?
Mr. Chair,
or-
for the minutes, I just need to
Yes.
call for public comments.
Ah,
Are there any
Yes,
public
please.
comments in Modesto on the minutes?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield on the minutes?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on the minutes? Seeing none and none online, Mr. Chair, I think without any objections to the minutes, you can deem them as approved without a vote.
Thank you. So done. Public comments. At this time, I'd like to read what this says. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. The public may make comments on each agenda item during the time allowed for public comments. Attention is called to the fact that the CAC is prohibited by law from taking any action on discussion, any action or discussion. I think that on is supposed to be an or.
I believe that's correct,
What
Mr. Chair.
matters-
Yeah, thank you.
That's that test too. Discussion of matters that are not on the agenda. Okay. Any public comments at this time?
Are there any members of the public in Modesto that would like to make comments?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? Seeing none and none online.
Thank you. Under chair comments, I just want to indicate that I attended the CARB meeting a couple of weeks ago and relayed to them the concerns that were expressed by members of this committee with regard to the situation of the trucks, electric trucks in Long Beach. And the fact that we, although Laura provides a relatively well presentation on updates, she's not able to respond to some of the comments and questions that the committee has. So we will have a representative from CARB at this meeting in order to respond to some comments and questions. And hopefully in the long term, we continue to have that representative. Let's move on to Executive Director comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to express appreciation for you coming, and that was actually the district's governing board meeting that the chair had attended, and it was a good discussion. And we're happy to see Dr. Cliff here as Executive Officer of CARB providing the updates and conversation later on the agenda. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for that. Just a couple of other quick items that I wanted to cover. At the last board meeting, the board reviewed the latest annual report to the community, which is a great piece of information for the public and for all of your constituents to have access to. It's an easier to read accounting of all the work that's happening in the San Joaquin Valley with respect to the various clean air efforts that are going on. A lot of highlighting of success and partnership, the progress that's being made, some of the remaining challenges. A lot of credit given to the residents, agriculture, and others that are all part of the collaborative effort that's going on here in the region. So I just wanted to note that I'm hearing to be published by the end of the day today online. We also have some printed versions available soon that could also be a resource. If you need some of those, let us know and we can work with you to provide some of those as well. Although the online version is certainly a good resource as well to use. I'd also wanted to let you know that the Central California chapter of the Public Relations Society, so there's that relates to outreach strategies and advertising and various related efforts. they actually gave us 2 awards recently. One of them was for the year before annual report to the community. So basically, it's the gold standard of these types of reports. That we were actually recognized for that, as well as the tractor replacement program commercial that you may or may not. Hopefully, you've seen it either online or on TV or other mechanisms. But basically, it's a commercial that involves a gentleman called Ivan who. And one of our CAC members is very familiar with, at least maybe others, who is a participant, a small farmer participant in the tractor replacement program, and it basically was a part of this commercial to continue partnering with ag on that effort. So that was actually also award winning. So we actually got 2 different awards, and I think I just stole the thunder from Jamie, who probably later was going to talk about that. Sorry, Jamie, but. And the last part I wanted to mention was at the board meeting, the same board meeting, the board did adopt the ozone contingency plan revision that addresses both the 2008 and 2015 8-hour ozone standards. This is something that the CAC has been hearing updates about from our planning team. We did get that adopted, so it's now routed through CARB to EPA for their review and hopefully approval, so that we can avoid, some of those major consequences under the Clean Air Act when these plans are not approved by EPA. So it's all with EPA at this point. I just want to let you know that so far so good on that front. We'll keep you posted on that as that moves forward. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Modesto? No. Any questions, Bakersfield? Fresno?
Very quickly, Samir, it might be helpful to share. Last meeting I was ranting a little bit about the Highway 41 detour, and I think the others might be encouraged to know that. I appreciate what you've done, and maybe that you could share that.
No, happy to. No, thank you, Dennis. Yeah, I wanted to just maybe a quick update on the construction, project that's basically causing some major delays and some emissions impacts, as were noted at the last meeting. I had a chance to actually talk to the Caltrans director about that project between these 2 meetings, and got a positive response in terms of understanding the concern, and also, hearing that they're very concerned about that as well. So the offer was basically for there to be some direct dialogue about that to basically get more involved into the inner workings of what's happening with that project. So I am connecting a CAC member, Dennis Medeiros, with Caltrans to provide, again, more of that local perspective. If there are any other members here also want to be involved in that, please let me know. But was able to communicate the concerns and receive a positive response, and hopefully there's better information at the very least, but maybe even some progress made on addressing those concerns in a more expedited fashion. So just wanted to provide that report. Thank you for.
And once I talk to her, I'll report back at the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Good.
Young man? You like? Oh, man. Okay. Samir, again, I want to, I don't know if Jamie's able to play that piece of the thing that you commented on about it's loaded. Mr. Chairman, if we could take a minute and have everybody look at this. I think this goes again to show the total collaboration of this air district and its staff to make the farmer program the example of a program voluntarily rather than command and control dictatorships. But if we can play that, I just think it has so much of what he said at that event, and very sincere grower, just totally would have never happened unless this district would have had the farmer program. So if we could play that for a second, Mr. Chairman, if you can bear with me.
Sure.
I'm glad there's high tech here. I wouldn't even know where to even attempt.
I'm Ivan Hurd. I'm a 3rd generation ag and livestock farmer here in Kings County. I went through the tractor replacement program, and it's a simple process. San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control, they'll help you do your paperwork. The grants are what they seem. So I got a 165 horsepower tractor here, the 6150R. This tractor here is $200,000 new. It's slightly used, and this tractor costs $94,000, and all I have to pay is $20,000. So I'm living proof of it.
Excellent. Thank you again, Samir, the entire staff, Aaron and Todd and all of you, Jamie and your entire team. I mean, there's a testimonial that farmer would have never, ever been able to do anything. And here he's being a part of this clean air program. And that brings me up to this thing, which we'll talk later on today, but a great achievement by this district. But again, Samir, I think for the awards and all the things you guys have done, I think that is the greatest example.
And Mr. Chair, I just have to say, you know, that we're just, you know, we're the name on it, but really the work is by agriculture, you know, with the support, the input of the CAC. And this program for many years has been shaped actually by the input that the CAC has been providing as we continue evolving it and enhancing it and really focusing on small farmers. You know, the 80% incentive level, that was something that, you know, we've talked a lot about here about having increased incentives for the smallest farmers. So the credit goes to the Valley Ag and you know, the actual stakeholders out there who are really doing the work, and we just try to emulate that through the program. So appreciate that. But it's actually been you, Manuel, and others here who've been the major force behind that. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, before Mr. Chair, I would ask for your indulgence. And before the card presentation, Ruth Chris Steakhouse on the way. If I could make a comment before ARB comes on, I'd appreciate it if you would allow me that time when that comes time for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Where was I? Fresno. Any comments from Fresno on the director's comments? I have one question for Samir. Would you happen to know what tractor the farmer gave up to receive the replacement?
I know it's definitely old because I remember seeing it, but Manuel put his microphone on. I think he's going to bail me out on this one. You got me, Mr. Chair, on this one.
Approximately the same horsepower, but a 1986 International. When he started it, when he took it to make sure it was running for the staff, they had thought maybe he had blown the engine. No, that's the way it runs. That's the way it runs. So Jamie and everybody, we went from a tractor with a telephone pole exhaust to a tractor that you can't even see the exhaust. And Mr. Chairman, that absolutely, that man to this day, when the day that it all happened, I mean, he was so gracious, and his family, and he is now working with his son, who's 27 years old, becoming a young farmer because of what that tractor did for them, being able to do more things. But his son saw an opportunity that, hey, maybe I could go into farming. I can make it. So, but a great question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, on that last part, you know, and I know we're going to move on with the agenda here, but just one last note is that that collaboration and the annual reports, which we will send out, by the way, to the CAC members the second it publishes, so you can share it with your constituents. It has a great profile of the collaborative work between us, CARB, EPA, the USDA, and most importantly, Valley Agriculture, to do some major work. There's a huge milestone this last year, late last year, that we all celebrated. We talked a little bit about that here as well. That's noted in that report. And so we wouldn't be able to do it actually in this case without state funding, without, it's a team actually with CARB to actually have the guidelines work the way that they do. I just wanted to note that that partnership extends well beyond just the Valley Air District and local agencies. The state actually has been a great partner as well with providing funding and also getting the guidelines to actually work the way they need to work. And that's just wanted to make sure that that was captured as well.
Yeah, just one final comment. I remember the International tractors. Yes, that's how they run. And a John Deere with an automatic transmission is a world of difference. So good for him. Next item on the agenda, CARB update. Honorable Steve Cliff.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, if I can make a comment before Mr. Cliff makes his opening comments. All right, great. Again, I want to thank the entire CAC board for my 2-minute thing and make sure, Dennis, I only go 2 minutes, cut me off.
2 minutes, that's it.
First thing is, I appreciate Dr. Cliff coming today, but also, all of this was set up in 1993, 92, when we formed this air district. The importance of the CAC, of what it plays to the board, but also of how this board works and functions. CARB is an integral part of everything we do because they're the armed end going to EPA. And we appreciate it when we have staff that come from your agency and present the materials so that we are able to go to our communities and present to them in various meetings of what we've heard or what is happening. Laura Brown, I guess, or Laura Carr, is a wonderful person. I think she's a great liaison, but when it comes to the rules, she is not able to perform that. And I get that, and we all understand that. She's doing a great job. But for us to move forward to our communities, especially today, the regulations, all of the stuff that's happening to us in this valley compared to many other parts of the state and even the country, it is so important, communications. And the communications has to come from CARB, has to come from EPA, and has to come with our air district. And the CAC is an integral part of that. And that's why it was formed as part of that board of the San Joaquin Valley. So again, we appreciate and we look forward to your input of your staff on key regulations that we in the industries, we in the communities, we in the cities, we in the businesses, all of that is an integral part. And we need to have the people that are working on those rules be able to present those to us. And we have the new technology of today. Of course, face-to-face is the most effective way of communications. But when we can't do that, absolutely Zoom. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the time. And again, coming from myself as an individual, but also that's been here since 1991, 92, I have seen, though, some opportunities that CARB has presented itself with information that has been valuable to us. So I hope forward as a member of the CAC that we can still have that relationship, Dr. Cliff, and especially with you taking Mr. Richard Corey's place and coming from the ground up, I think you see the value of that. So, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for your indulge.
Mr. Cliff.
Can you hear me? There we go. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I was having some trouble getting off mute and the video to work there. So thank you. Thanks very much for having the opportunity to speak to you today, and really appreciate the invitation the chair sent several weeks ago, inviting us to participate in this in this committee, and just for the chance to talk a bit about our rules. And I understand you have some specific interest in a couple of our rules, the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation, as well as the small off-road engine regulation. And so I'm here to present a bit about those and offer whatever responses I can. I'm certainly not the technical expert on these regs, but at least offer the resources and the participation of CARB in in following up with any other specific questions, should that be necessary. So Laura, I think you're going to help me by sharing the screen with, great, perfect. So hopefully folks can see that. And if you can go to the slide mode, that would be helpful. Sorry, presentation mode. And folks, let me know when you can see those. Can folks see the slides?
Yeah, I believe, Laura, we see the slides, but not in presentation mode. I wonder if it's like a multiple screen issue. Like, is there a way to, is it showing up maybe on a different screen, Laura, the actual presentation mode?
No, it's just
Anyway,
on
we
the
see,
screen.
okay, yeah, we see the slides, but you know, like in a more condensed version, like not non-presentation mode.
Let's see, even if I go to slideshow, is that still not showing up full screen?
No.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Teams is not my native habitat here. Zoom rather.
No, I think, I don't know if you could just maybe minimize the left menu, and it might still work. You know, I think it might, hopefully it's big enough for the members to see, but otherwise,
Thanks, Samir.
whatever you could do with that, Laura. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, and it's I'm glad Laura's here to help with the presentation, because it's really hard to manage doing a presentation and manage the presentation at the same time. So so Laura, if you can hopefully
Laura,
minimize that. Yeah.
If you email it to Katrina also, if that's feasible, we could probably just call it up here through the system too. If would that work for you guys?
Sure, I can do that quickly.
Good. And Mr. Chair, I also wanted to just note, it'd be helpful to have a follow-up conversation with you to discuss CARB's role in these meetings going forward. Of course, we'd like to participate in the way that's most meaningful for the committee. But, you know, obviously it would be helpful for us if we knew there were specific topics that we can make sure the right people were in the meeting for those specific topics. So in particular, it was really helpful to get your letter, you know, knowing the very specific items that you wanted to discuss. But would be interested in having a follow-up conversation if you're interested in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Samir can give you my phone number.
Perfect.
I think part of the concern was that there were at times during the update questions which Laura could not respond to. And the concern is that we really would like to have someone that can respond to the particular question, and not knowing what the question would be in advance. I don't know that it's going to be helpful unless someone is here at each meeting.
Yeah, well, we can have that follow-up conversation. That sounds good. I appreciate that.
All right.
And I would have gladly joined in person today, but in fact, I'm in Washington, D.C. this week. So joining you from across the country a few hours ahead of schedule. It's just after lunch for me here. I wonder if Katrina has received the file yet.
Good morning. Yes, our IT team is loading them up right now.
Perfect. So Laura, maybe you can stop sharing screen. Sorry for the little pause there. Oh, look at this. Perfect. Amazing. Okay. So again, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for the Air District and the members of the Citizen Advisory Committee for inviting me here to speak today, and in particular to the chair. So as you know, I'm Steve Cliff. I'm the executive officer for the California Air Resources Board, and I'm going to provide a brief overview on these two regulations, the Advanced Clean Fleets Rule and amendments to the Small Off-Road Engine Regulation, and as well interested in trying to answer some questions should those come up at the end. So happy to participate however makes the most sense for y'all. Excuse me. I wanted to reiterate why it's really important for us to be working on these regulations. And so in particular, I'm starting here with the truck rule. Trucking has an outsized impact on both climate change and air pollution, as well as, and very importantly, community health. They make up only about 6% of vehicles, but almost a quarter of our transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions and nearly half of our smog-forming emissions. So tackling pollution from trucks is critical, not only to achieve state mandates, but to achieve federal mandates for clean air. And I know this committee is working with the Air District very diligently to ensure that we're meeting our federal Clean Air Act requirements, and addressing trucking is a major portion of that work. The pollution from diesel trucks is concentrated in low-income communities and communities of color that are surrounded by freeways, ports, and other freight activity. And those communities are more exposed to the health risks associated with the pollution, including the increased incidence of asthma, cancer, and hospitalization, as well as increased susceptibility to respiratory illness due to poor air quality. So for California, truck electrification is a critical solution to addressing both climate change and protecting public health. So if we can go to the next slide, please. As you know, last spring, CARB adopted the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation, or what we call ACF. It's the first of its kind for medium and heavy-duty trucks, and it's going to result in improved air quality by requiring fleets to purchase the cleanest vehicles that are available. It's expected to increase the number of zero-emission trucks in California to about 500,000 by 2035, and achieve substantial reductions in NOx, particulate matter, and greenhouse gas emissions. It complements the previously adopted Advanced Clean Trucks manufacturer sales requirement, and it has four main components. The first component is the 100% ZEV sales requirement beginning in 2036. And that means that all medium and heavy-duty vehicles sold in California must be zero emissions starting in the 2036 timeframe. That piece of the regulation is a key element for meeting the state's carbon neutrality target, the goals laid out in the governor's executive order, and reducing health impacts from pollution in furthering our requirements under the Federal Clean Air Act. Secondly, the drayage truck requirements apply to tractors operating at the state's seaports and rail yards. That requirement will create a fully zero-emission drayage fleet by 2035. Third, the high priority fleet requirement applied to federal agencies and well-capitalized fleets with 50 or more vehicles, or with greater than 50 million in annual revenue. Those fleets have the greatest choice when complying with the ACF. They can either comply by only adding zero emissions and near zero emission vehicles to the California fleet starting this year, or they can opt into what's called the ZEV milestones schedule, which is a ZEV phase-in as a percentage of the California fleet that gives them additional flexibility to sort of choose which path works the best. And then lastly, state and local government fleets must purchase ZEVs as a percent of their normal purchases starting this year, or they can opt into the ZEV milestone schedule that I just mentioned. Next slide, please. So knowing that implementation is not a one-size-fits-all and that different fleets can face different challenges with compliance, the Advanced Clean Fleets rule contains over 10 provisions that assist a fleet with compliance. And those kind of assistance things are listed here on the slide. That includes a ZEV purchase exemption to address the availability and daily usage needs of a particular fleet. It includes exemptions for vehicle configurations that still need some time, including longer range vehicles such as sleeper cab tractors that would rely on regional charging and fueling networks, and specialized vehicles such as those that use power takeoff. There's also exemptions for specific vehicles. For example, the 5-day pass is applicable to a small subset of high priority fleets that infrequently deliver specialized goods into California. And there's some very specific provisions for certain fleets, such as the waste and wastewater fleets or rental fleets provisions. Fleets that are subject to the drayage regulation have access to the vehicle delivery and ZEV infrastructure delay extensions, as well as the non-repairable vehicle provision. And as we work through the initial implementation of ACF, CARB's been hosting training and open Q&A sessions. And we've also been hosting targeted, what are called the Truck Regulation Implementation Groups, or TRIG, that are focused on outreach, infrastructure, rule provisions, and border communities. So for those who are interested in this and want to participate in the events, those are completely open to the public. And we have our listserv notices that go out that provide more information about what kind of public opportunities for engagement there are. And happy to address a little bit more of that in question. But would love to actually switch to SOAR unless we have specific questions here and you'd like me to stop.
Any questions, Modesto? Bakersfield? Fresno?
I think the only question I have, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Cliff, I know his time is very valuable, being that he's in Washington, D.C. I think in that communications, I think all of this, we need to see as a rural community, what is our power grid going to be like, and what demands have the utility side. You may have 3 utilities. You bring utilities in outside of California. We have folks that are tearing down power hydro facilities, so hydropower is disappearing. We haven't built any dams. We do know that the utility side is increasing. So I think on part of the presentation, Dr. Cliff, if there is something that the utility side has shown you that they could provide sufficient amount of power in California, we have some 520 cities. Of that number, many of those are rural communities, and they are the ones that have less power available to them, even internet service to them. So do you have, or does your staff have, Dr. Cliff, a slide on the utility side? We know where you've gone through the truck side of what you want to do, but the utility side, no one knows. And as we speak today, PG&E is raising the rate continuously on rural community families, which is becoming difficult. So I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And if I could add to that, basically, while this is the zero emission vehicle is a critical solution, which is where you started, I think the fundamental question that Mr. Cunha is indicating, is it a practical solution considering the ability to provide the recharge and everything that goes along with this type of solution? We can pass the rules, but can they effectively be implemented? That's the real question here.
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that, and thank you both for those questions and comments. So we're very much aware of the challenges that Mr. Cunha mentioned, and in fact, we've heard some pretty specific concerns about trying to get power at certain locations. I think this is in part why it's really critical and incumbent upon fleets to start having conversations early with both the vehicle providers as well as with the utilities, so that as utilities are building out infrastructure, they have knowledge of where that infrastructure is needed most and where it's needed first. And so in that, one of the things that we have done to help aid implementation is worked with CalSTART to develop what's called the CalFleet Advisor tool. And so what a fleet can do is actually put their information in their fleet information into this tool. And that tool will kind of spit out what they need to do and when they need to do it. And that'll give them information then to start talking to suppliers about what types of vehicles might be available, and start talking to the utility about what they expect they'll need in terms of infrastructure and energy supply going forward. One of the challenges is we can analyze this from a regulatory defensibility perspective. We can put in all the data that we have, and we did get a lot of information reported to us under the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation. There were specific reporting requirements under that regulation for fleets. So we use that information to develop the rules and, believe that the rules are implementable based on our best available information. But that's not going to be everything. And so real world considerations are going to apply, which is important from a fleet's perspective to kind of understand what their requirements are going to be going forward. And because of that uncertainty is largely why these exemptions and extensions exist. So, for example, if there isn't the ability to get power, then there are extensions that are allowable under the regulation. We're going to need that information. We're going to need very specific information about the relationship between the fleet and the utility, what they've actually done, what their fleet looks like, and what they're hearing back from the utility to take advantage of some of these provisions. But I do think that the regulation provides a lot of flexibility to allow fleets to comply and for us to make progress towards the goals that are laid out in the regulation. I will say also, there are some innovative charging solutions that are being considered out there. For example, there are some entities that are working with utilities to find where excess power exists within the grid, and then take advantage of getting that excess power for public charging access. So these are kind of a multitude of different opportunities, none of which is necessarily a silver bullet, but which are going to help us make some progress along the way. And we understand certainly there's going to be some constraints that will be very difficult to overcome. And we're going to have to just evaluate those as they come up and then address them each in turn. And so the challenge is going to be both for fleet owners and for manufacturers, as well as the public sector as government, to work together to try and provide as many solutions and options for fleets so that we can make progress achieving the statewide mandates and the federal mandates that we have to comply with.
So, sir, you have a heavy lift or requirement for the industry. Right now, you have over 500,000 semi-trucks in California registered. You only have less than 2,000 electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are going fully loaded about 100 to 120 miles. It takes 90 minutes to fully charge them. So you're asking really to do 4 trucks that you're now doing for 1 truck. So with your electric grid, you may have power in one area, but you're going to have to put it much further or closer together than the cities are. Between Fresno and Bakersfield, you wouldn't even be able to get a load from one to the other without having to stop somewhere and get it charged. So you're asking us to believe that by 2035, you'll have all ZIF components available, and by whatever the grid will be able to support that, let alone all the electrification you're having for industries, your stationary generators, your residential. The grid cannot produce that amount even before 2050. So the regulations of some of them, as we are going in the mandates, I know you have exceptions, but I think they need to be tempered to be evenly pulled along the way. I was at CalCog, and it's admitted that we won't be able to do much between now and 2032 to get the increases. So who makes the balance? I know it was in a 1987 regulation, but shouldn't we be trying to be a little bit more pragmatic?
Just
Well-
to add to that, it's my understanding that range, which is what was just brought up, is also affected by weather. The colder it gets, the less your range. And that materially affects the ability to get from one place to another and how far, for instance, through the grapevine, it's difficult when it gets down to the 20s, so as to speak, for electric vehicles to get the distance that they otherwise would have as far as their range is concerned. And has that been considered?
Yes, so y'all bring up very, very good points, and I think the concerns are, in some respects, valid. And I think also the what we found in terms of what trucks are able to deliver has, in some respects, exceeded expectations. So both can be true at the same time when you look at the performance of certain vehicles. For example, the Tesla trucks that have been delivered, there's been some pretty in-depth studies about what those trucks are able to carry, both in terms of load and how they're doing in terms of range and rechargeability. And so there's some public information that I'd be happy to share with this committee as a follow-up, if you're interested, that shows that those trucks are in fact performing better than was expected in many cases, and that includes going over the grapevine. So I think there are some real case studies out there, some real world information based on technology that exists today that's showing, really, really good performance of those vehicles. I will also say that, when you look at the regulations, and I admit, like, if I'm in the private sector and I'm looking at this, it seems a little scary, right? That I'm going to have to spend a lot of my money on new technology that feels unproven, that is a little uncertain, and it's kind of unclear where this is all going to go. But what I'm going to say is, these phase in over a very long period of time, and we're talking about, for drayage, a turnover of the drayage trucks that serve the ports and rail yards. The subset of those vehicles is in the tens of thousands, not 500,000, that serve those applications. The rest of the fleet, it's phasing in over decades. So this is not a everything happening this year kind of issue. But that said, there are some challenges that do need to be overcome, and those technology developments are something that we're very much watching, and that we're seeing great improvement over time. And I think that's why we're really optimistic about the ability of manufacturers to serve these markets. And then I wanted to I know we've talked a lot about electricity and battery electric, but there are other zero emission options like hydrogen fuel cells that may be a better option for some fleets. So these are the types of things that, we're interested in fleets working through and trying to do their due diligence in looking at what technologies might be available as well. And then I noted in one of Mr. Kuna's comments about the cost of electricity, and of course the cost of hydrogen is also a big concern. Currently, hydrogen is really not competitive with diesel. So even if that's a good option, it's not competitive in terms of the cost today. But there's many efforts underway to bring those costs down, including the investments that are made under the Inflation Reduction Act, with a goal of bringing the cost of hydrogen down to levels that are competitive, and so that the total cost of ownership can be cost competitive with current technology trucks. On the electricity side, it's true that electricity rates have gone up for a variety of reasons. But I will say that there's actually good evidence and studies that show that, in fact, the grid is better supported when it has this broader distribution of demand through electric vehicles, both trucks and cars. And as a result, that rates are tempered more because of this additional load than they would otherwise be. So in other words, if we didn't have electric trucks and electric cars on the road, the rate structure would have to be even higher to support the kind of dwindling load and the more distributed supply of those who have rooftop solar and things like that. So having that additional demand and building out the renewable supply, actually electric vehicles help benefit rates overall. You know, and so it turns out that's more of an advantage than a disadvantage here. So I know this isn't necessarily going to convince everyone in the room or on this committee. I understand the skepticism and frankly the concern, and many of those concerns are founded. So I acknowledge that. I would say that we do have a whole of government approach. We're trying to work very closely with our sister agencies, bring them to the table, and they are very much aware of the goals that the state has, some of which are embodied in our regulations, but also that are more broadly put on all of our agencies to ensure that we're moving forward to address federal and state mandates. So we're working very closely together, and we're asking a lot of the private sector. But this is, our charge as public servants. We're doing what we can to make sure that these are implementable rules and trying to make very clear to the private sector what's necessary in order to ensure compliance and ultimately to meet our clean air goals.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment?
Please, go ahead.
I'm from the city of Reedley, and in our area, we have small rural communities and many farms, just similar to the west side of Fresno County. We don't have port cities. We don't have that congestion, but we do have Highway 99 and Highway 5 coming down through our valley. And the way we get commodities to port is through trucks. And our farmers in these smaller communities, I'm trying to figure out how are they going to be able to, number one, afford your vehicles. I think the cost will be prohibitive to have a small fleet of trucks that I know when I was in the farming industry, we were running, I think, 9 trucks, semi-trucks around the valley here. And will there be availability to even purchase those? I've been told that that's kind of a conundrum right now too. Also, where in Reedley and Orange Cove and Sanger are there going to be charging stations? How are we going to connect those trucks to be able to charge in the night so during the day they can go out? And are they going to be able to go 600 or 700 miles a day like they do right now with gas? And where are they going to fuel when they're out in Wood Lake or Tranquility on the east-west side? And another question I have is the weight of the batteries to facilitate an electric charge. I think in doing that, we lose our cargo space, which means more trucks on the road. Another item is the length of charge to get that delivery. And, most of the trucks, once they have produce from the packing house, have refrigeration. How is that going to be dealt with? And I'm sure that will be more of a load on electric charge as it is in our homes. So from the farming community in my valley, I'm very concerned about this regulation and how we fit in that and how we can make that happen and still stay in business. Thank you.
Dr. Cliff, this is Ben, I'm the chair. I'm glad she asked that question because most of the trucking companies are in the large size, 100, 200, 300 trucks. And I can see where they can install the infrastructure on their facilities to charge those trucks. But when you're dealing with the rural truckers that only have 1, 2, 3, maybe 5, maybe 6, and in her case 9, where do they charge? Are they going to have to build a charging station at their farm? Right now, virtually every gas station that's being built in this community or the state has 5, 6, 10, 12, 14 charging stations at it, and most of them are full with Tesla cars. But when it comes to a truck, there's very few, if hardly any, in the state, except for perhaps a few large trucking companies. I know in Manteca you have Lay's potato chips or Laura Scudder's, whoever it is today. Their trucks are trying the electrics, and I see them on the road all the time, but they're carrying chips. If you loaded that truck with steel beams going from here to LA and back, where do you charge it up? It's a concern, and I noticed when you initially started your response, it was a report prepared. I haven't seen that report. I haven't been on this board long enough. Maybe it's been passed out, I don't know. But it seems like there's several moving targets into the future. The trucks themselves, the infrastructure needed for the infrastructure. Is anybody trying to bring all those into play at some time in the future? Did somebody pick 2035? Is that a moving target, or is that a definite target? I mean, there are so many things up in the air, so many balls moving at the same time. Who's keeping track of it, and who in reality thinks it's all going to come together in 2035 or 2050? Look how long it took to go from a 2-cylinder gas engine to a V8 when the cars first started. Who knows what the future is? I'm concerned. I've been in the ag business, I've been in the trucking business, I've been in public service, so I get the whole picture, and I get what the Air District is trying to do. But I get lost in the bureaucratic mentality that it's easy to come up with a regulation, but is it realistic to think that in 10 years it's going to all come together? I don't see it. I certainly probably won't be here in 10 years. You know, it's mind-boggling at this time.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that. So I will say regarding the study that I mentioned, I don't know if it's been shared with this committee previously, but as I said, we're happy to, we'll get that to the Air District to share out. The weight limit. So one comment that was made was regarding weight limits. And this is an issue that I've heard recently from several in the ag community. And it's true that battery electric is heavier than their diesel counterparts. And so that can limit the overall cargo capacity, not because of space issues, but because of weight limitations. 80,000 pounds is 80,000 pounds. There are exemptions to those 80,000 pound weight limits, but those exemptions come with cost. They mean if you exceed that weight limit and you get a special permit, then you have more limited ability to navigate the roadways because of bridge weight limit considerations and so forth. So we're well aware of that. And, this is an issue that I actually heard quite readily last week when I met with a group of ag stakeholders. and what I offered and what I'm happy to do for those who are interested is if there's a way to facilitate a conversation with the California Highway Patrol and the Department of Transportation, I'm happy to facilitate those conversations as well regarding how exemptions for weight limits can work. But regarding the question about potato chips, I've heard this before. I don't know where that comes from. I guess I kind of understand the, potato chips. In my experience, those bags are largely full of air. And so the idea that, these trucks are just carrying around really low density and lightweight cargo, sure, it works for them, but not for, in your example, steel beams. The Lay's potato chips is actually owned by PepsiCo, as you probably know. And so, in fact, they are hauling around cargo at capacity, at the full capacity. So the study looks at that. So I guess what I'll say is, 80,000 pounds is still 80,000 pounds. It's sort of the old, a pound of lead or a pound of feathers. Like they're the same thing in terms of the vehicle capacity. So, and what, these are rated for that carrying capacity. And so the study does lay that out. And as I said, that's today's technology. We are seeing great advancements in technology going forward. So to the more speculative question, I can't say what will happen in 2035. I don't see that as a moving target. I think we're very optimistic about what technology development will look like, and the schedule of these regulations is such that this isn't a complete fleet turnover in 2035. As I mentioned, it's, in that longer term, there are useful life requirements in law, and those useful life requirements mean that that turnover is slower than than one might think, given that the regulation just came on the books. So it's going to take a few decades for this to be fully implemented. And so I do think that there's going to be a lot of technology development in that time frame, and much more opportunity for the fleets to advance in ways that ultimately save money. It's granted the vehicles are more expensive to purchase up front, but the experience that fleets are having today, and this is certainly the case in the light duty vehicle fleet, the total cost of ownership is lower as a result of using electricity versus purchasing fuel for combustion. So I know there were a lot of other questions in there. I don't know if I got all of them, and I'm certain I didn't, but happy to follow up on any of that. And again, I'd be glad to share out that report that I mentioned.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a quick question, Mr.
Quick
Chair?
question.
Have you taken any steps, your agency taken any steps to ease the burden to everyone through the tax code? Specifically, instead of long-term depreciation, having some type of immediate write-off as it relates to the costs that are expected of each and every person, each and every business that's required to comply. Are you advocating for that?
So under, and I can't say exactly how we advocate at the state level. Certainly, we support the governor's budget, so I don't have specific comment on how we might advocate behind the scenes, for what the governor ultimately does on legislative proposals. But we have, generally speaking, been really supportive of things that support zero emission vehicles. So that, ranged everything from allowing for, in the light duty fleet, for passenger vehicles, allowing those vehicles to operate in high occupancy vehicle lanes with a single occupant vehicle if it's zero emissions, to the federal tax credits that are available for both light and duty and heavy duty vehicles. And so I did want to add on that for the heavy duty vehicles, there are federal tax credits. There are incentives that, you know, we have had here in the state level, and, you know, that comes through. CARB has had, for example, the HVIP program, the Heavy Duty Vehicle Incentive Program, which provides vouchers for heavy duty vehicle, zero emission heavy duty vehicles. And as well, Moyer is another opportunity. So we've kind of supported a lot of those things to help out and to get fleets into vehicles. And in fact, we're ahead of schedule on the Advanced Clean Trucks rule by about 2 years. So that regulation just went into effect. And we already are seeing more demand for that regulation than is even required 2 years from now. Much of that is in the smaller, lighter duty vehicles, not in the tractor trailers that we tend to talk about and focus on a lot in these conversations. But in fact, the rules, even in advanced clean fleets, most of those rules are affecting those larger fleets that have more trucks. They're considered medium and heavy duty trucks, but in most cases, they might be in the kind of class 3 to 6 range, where there is a lot more opportunity for electrification, either through hydrogen or primarily through battery electric. So that is something that's already happening. And I think in part, the technology advancements that are happening are in part because there has been so much demand in those last mile delivery sort of vehicles. And I remembered now I wanted to mention one other thing that the chair said about the size of the vehicle fleet. So for example, the comment that came up about having 9 vehicles in your fleet, I had in the slides that in my speaking points that this regulation only affects fleets that are 50 or more trucks, or that are very well capitalized, that maybe have fewer trucks but are very well capitalized. Not true if it's drayage, but the drayage fleet is actually, the amount of trucks that actually serve drayage applications is relatively small compared to this total truck population. It's like less than 1/10 of the total trucks that actually serve drayage operations. So in many cases, anyone that has fewer than 50 trucks is actually not even impacted by the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. That's not going to be true across the board, but in many cases that will be true.
Well, that's interesting you say that. So if the limit is 50, so a farmer who maybe has 5 trucks is not required to have electric trucks? Is that true? Is that what you're indicating?
That's right, except for those trucks that are going into, that are in drayage applications, so that if they're going into ports. So there's a drayage registry.
Okay.
The drayage registry, which currently exists, has a few hundred thousand, about 213,000 vehicles in it, I believe. But I would say fewer than 30,000 of those vehicles actually serve drayage applications on a regular basis. And so the requirement is you can't add to the drayage registry. You can currently, because we don't have a waiver for this rule yet from US EPA. But once the waiver goes into place, you will not be able to add vehicles to the drayage registry unless it's zero emissions. And then that vehicle must serve the port. It must enter a port at least once annually to remain in the drayage registry. So so generally speaking, if in your example, if there's 5 vehicles on a farm, they would not, unless they were a really capitalized operation making at least 50 million or more, then they would not have requirements under this reg unless that vehicle is going to a port. If that vehicle is going to a port, then eventually, once its useful life provisions kick in, it would need to move to zero emissions. So it's not a one size fits all answer, and I don't mean it to be so complicated, but I'm trying to be accurate in the response.
Okay, but the
Mr.
long-term goal here is that there will no longer be diesel or gas engines. So at some point in the future, and I'm assuming 2035, governor has said somewhere in that area, there will be no more gas engines. 2042.
Right.
Okay, so at that point, if the farmer had 5 trucks and he needs to replace it, you can't replace it with anything but an electric truck. You get my point? At some point here, the farmer is going to be out of the trucking business, whether he likes it or not.
Mr. Chairman, to your comment to Dr. Cliff's comment, this is Manuel Cunha. I want to make it clear to the entire panel that's listening, CAC members, all Tier 3 trucks, engines, diesel, manufactured in the year 2010 were not issued any DMV tags at all. They were operating absolutely great in 23, 22, go back. But in the year 2024, DMV did not issue any tags to all Tier 3 trucks. So that means, as a concern, because of availability and cost, all of those Tier 3 trucks have to go buy a used Tier 4, and there is no program for that, or buy a brand new $190,000, $200,000 tractor truck. But I do want to make it clear is that, Mr. Chairman, yes, you asked about the 5 trucks. If those 5 trucks are Tier 4, you're going to get a tag, no problem, a DMV tag. If they were Tier 3, 2010 and under, they were not issued a tag, and that's where we have the crisis. It's not about falling into the 50 million. You know, again, that number came out of the system. I don't know where it came from, Dr. Cliff, but it came from out of the system. And there is an attempt to go from 50 down to 25. And so I hear that discussion. So I know that Mr. Chairman and Dr. Cliff has taken a lot of time and everything. And I want to thank him personally, though, for being here and doing these questions. But there is several questions that the CAC has to explain to, as we have one grower talking about from the town of Reedley or wherever they are. But I do have to make it clear, all Tier 3s that are operating currently in 23 year or 22 was moving agricultural freight has now been all stopped. Unless you live on the farm with that truck and it doesn't cross roads, you have that little 1,000-mile deal for ag, and that's it. So I do want to make this clear is that all Tier 3s are gone, and ARB is working on a Tier 5 diesel, Now, what that means is you're going to spend the money on a new Tier 5 engine, which is, and Dr. Cliff, you may know the cost of that engine, but I'm hearing from $320,000 to $520,000 is what that engine will cost, putting it in a vehicle. But we're yet forcing people into electric zeros, and yet we're making a mandate on Tier 5 when the manufacturers are probably going to tell us, forget California altogether. But there are some great questions of concerns. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time that he has given, Dr. Cliff has. But I just had to say that because I don't want the people that are listening to this to think we don't have a problem. No, we have a problem because they did not issue any more Tier 3 tags to those trucks. And there's thousands of those trucks not going to move product. Thank you.
Manuel, we get it.
Chairman,
Dr. Cliff, excuse me, Dr. Cliff, we've eaten a lot of your time and this committee's time on a subject that I don't think is completely discussed yet. Samir, is it possible to put together some type of roundtable so that we can sit down as a committee with a representative or representatives to carry on this conversation?
Mr. Chair, I think there's probably a number of different ways that we can continue the conversation. And I think it's probably worth talking to Dr. Cliff sort of about where those opportunities are. I mean, there are definitely some Brown Act considerations for things, say like a roundtable. Now, these meetings, I mean, there is a monthly meeting where we can kind of coming out of this conversation, decide with CARB, you know, which areas of focus and how that might work. There's a variety of mechanisms, I think, for doing that. I think what you're saying is based on time and the depth of the topic that perhaps there's a more follow-up discussion needed on this, which I think we can brainstorm with you, Mr. Chair, and with Dr. Cliff to see what might make the most sense moving forward. I know there were a lot of issues there kind of put in front of Dr. Cliff, and he also, I think, wanted to also cover one more topic as well. So just, you know, I hope that we do have time to cover. There's other items on the agenda as well, but I understand it's also very important for the CAC. So we'll let you, decide how much more time you want to spend on these CARB updates. But just want to note there are other items on the agenda as well.
Chairman, and may I speak? John Sanders, Bakersfield.
Please go ahead.
Okay, real quick. This is in regards to it piggybacks Manuel's comments. I do a lot of work at the DMV in my role, and I've been in there for the last 6 working days. There's multiple truckers facing the repercussions because of the CARB turnaround on the $30 registration. One of them is going to be the fruits and vegetables are not going to be processed in a time and will rot. Right now, according to the people that work in the DMV, the turnaround time is 2 to 3 weeks after payment of the $30 to register that vehicle. And these are just for tier 4, things that qualify. Now, the DMV is working hard, but their hands are tied, and they've just said, hey, you gotta wait this long. But at the study group in November 2023, one of the affiliates was excited about his 400 plus enforcement officers coming to his branch. You know, what if we use some of that enforcement team to get caught up on clearing the way for the trucks to be registered, so everything we grow here in the valley doesn't, sit somewhere and not get shipped to the right place. That's all I have to say. But it's a suggestion, but it's also a question of, if we have these 400 people, why wouldn't we use some of them inside this room where they're making all the approvals, and so the DMV can do their work and the people can actually do their business. So thank you.
Thank you.
Be glad to address any of those comments. I understand that issue as well. And it's not quite exactly related to the advanced clean fleets, but I believe you're talking about the clean truck check, which was established under Senate Bill 210. And so that particular fee, and I appreciate you bringing that up, the $30 fee was due at the end of the year. We extended that actually until the end of January. And more recently, there have been holds on registrations, which is required by law as part of that SB 210 and then the subsequent regulation. So I will just say that we send over a file to the Department of Motor Vehicles nightly. So if you pay your fee today, that's updated in the system, and it actually gets automatically updated each night for DMV to include in their system. So there really shouldn't be any inordinate delay. I'm not aware of and have not heard anything about the 2 to 3 week delay. So I will take that back to staff and ask them to look into this issue. So I appreciate you raising that because my understanding is that each evening, sort of after the workday, when that happens at midnight, this is a file that gets transferred over, and so you sort of have a good list and that tells you like these trucks have paid their fee. There should be no hold on the registration. Back to the question that Mr. Cunha raised. It's true that there is what's called the omnibus regulation that requires new engines in 2024 and then again in 2027 to meet certain lower emissions requirements. So that updates the prior certification requirements that were the older the 2010 certification requirements. And so this new omnibus regulation actually will be consistent with the regulation at the federal level. So US EPA has similar regulations. So there should actually be no discrepancy when those new requirements come into effect in 2027. In other words, every state, every new vehicle sold nationally will have to meet essentially the same requirements. That was actually part of an agreement that we reached with the truck and engine manufacturers. For 2024, 25, and 26, there are some requirements as part of that were negotiated with the truck and engine manufacturers. And I will just note, I do hear from some about availability of trucks. Some of these are related to just broader kind of supply issues. And so it's difficult to get trucks throughout the US as a result of broader supply issues and demand. And then some of the things, frankly, just are because there is sometimes confusion about how that impacts how a manufacturer, those who are shipping vehicles into California, how they're impacted by regulations. So we try and have those conversations to make sure that it's very well understood what the requirements are, so that there isn't any uncertainty for a dealer shipping any type of equipment into California. This actually relates to the next item on the agenda, which was the SOAR regulation as well. We understand that sometimes people get kind of not sure exactly how California rules are going to impact them, so they decide not to send equipment into California. But that's something that we try and work with industry to help allay those concerns and to better understand and frankly do a lot of education on our rules to make sure that that's not an ongoing issue. But in 2027, the rules are going to be same across the nation. So there's not going to be a difference between selling a truck in Indiana or selling in California.
One more question.
I have a comment. I wanted to make sure I understood. For the Senate Bill 210, the gentleman was speaking about having issues with the DMV, and you were saying that you were unaware of them. I believe that a lot of the industry is having issues where the tags have been paid, but we haven't received any of the tags. And that is a problem, because if we're to follow regulation, we should be doing, I think we had two options of how we were going to check vehicles coming in to make sure that they were meeting the regulation, but without the tags, we can't follow through with that portion. So if you were going to go back and check, I know that from hearing what you said, the system updates to DMV, but there is an issue with us receiving. So that gentleman seems like he was actually in a DMV office. A lot of people do stuff online, or they pay ahead of time and they're expecting these tags to be in. But I would say, and I don't know if the consensus in this room is the same, but most facilities aren't receiving their tags or don't have their tags, and we should have them already. It's May already. And I believe it was extended till January 30th. So if you are going to go back, if you could please check on that for us so that we can make sure that we can comply with regulation by having our tags available.
Yeah, certainly will. Thanks for mentioning that. The requirement for actually doing the reporting of information to show compliance with the emissions requirements doesn't start until the fall. So right now, this is really just whether or not you can get registered after paying the $30 registration fee. So the additional tag that you're talking about is something that I'll need to discuss with staff. But I will look into that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I think it's time to move on to the next item. Thank you, Mr. Cliff, or Dr. Cliff.
Thank you.
You've done it.
Did you want me to? Sorry, did you want me to address the SOAR regulation, or did you want to just move on to, and we can do that at a different time?
Well, we have a lengthy agenda, and we're already an hour and a half into, so we need to move on to the next item, and I understand you're part of the next item as well. So let's move on to the next item.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, and I definitely support, having time for, I just wanted to note that, and if Dr. Cliff is okay with this, there is remaining couple slides on the other parts that I think the SOAR regulation that he was intending to cover, which if we could share that, if you guys are okay with that, we're happy to get that to the members and then work with you, Dr. Cliff, to see if you wanted to maybe cover that at a different time. I think that there were a lot of questions around that rule that you did not have a chance yet to cover, and we can certainly get your information out and then just follow up and see what makes the most sense for everybody on that. And then there is an item where I do know CARB is a part of it. I don't think, Dr. Cliff, you personally are necessarily a part of it, but that's the PM plan. Mr. Chair, if I could suggest that we move item number 12 ahead of item number 11, just given where we are on the agenda. That's an item that I know has been important to the CAC to get those updates on the plan. I think you can maybe move the order of those to ensure we have time to cover that update.
Okay. So we're done with item 8. You want to move on to item 9?
Sorry, so we just covered item. I'm sorry, let me restate this. So I think just to make sure I'm a little clear. So we just finished item number 8. So you're correct. We can probably do item. I would suggest item 9. There is a packet that summarizes item 9. I don't think that you necessarily have to get the verbal report on that. I would suggest maybe moving on past that item again with where we are in the agenda. Item 10 we can do quickly right now, so maybe we can move to item 10 and cover that really quick, and then what I would suggest is moving 12 after item 10. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. So suggest item 10 quickly, and then item 12 after 10.
Mr. Chair, also if we can just have Dr. Cliff went through a lot on the SOAR. If we can have those items sent to us, Dr. Cliff, so we can have those items in front of us, and then we can reschedule the SOAR part of it maybe for the next meeting with one of your staff or yourself. But let's see if we can get those documents that he has prepared. If we can have those ahead of time, that would work perfect for us, Mr. Chairman.
I agree.
Including these, of which he did a great job on. So if we could get both of those items from Dr. Cliff, that would be super.
Frame has those.
Thank you,
so,
Doctor.
Happy to share. Thank you.
And we appreciate your time, Steve, for being here, and been very generous with your time. So thank you on behalf of the district as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on to item 9.
So I'm going to recommend we skip item 9 just because you have the information in your packet, and we go to item 10 for a quick presentation by. I got Morgan here next to me. You can walk us through that item really quickly here.
Okay, item 10.
All right. Good morning, and thank you. Just as a quick primer, the district has 3 regional hearing boards. Each of those hearing boards hears petitions for variances or permit appeals or other things as required by state law. One of the duties that has been tasked with the CAC from our governing board is for the CAC to interview and make recommendations for potential new hearing boards that the board then considers as recommendations made by the CAC in deciding whether or not to appoint a new hearing board member. So currently we have a few vacancies, and we had opened up a process for soliciting applicants. We have several applicants for the Southern Region engineer primary position, as well as for a public alternate position and also in our Southern Region Hearing Board. So as has been past practice, the CAC will usually create an ad hoc subcommittee containing 2 members from each of the regional zones of the district to go through a quick phone interview with the prospective hearing board members, and then to bring back a recommendation to the entire CAC for action. And if a recommendation is made, then forward that on to the governing board. So what we're looking for here today is just for the chair to solicit input and to ultimately appoint up to 6 total members, preferably 2 from each of the regions, to serve on this ad hoc subcommittee.
Would that be volunteers?
I'd be happy, this Manuel from the Central, to volunteer for the committee.
This is Dennis Treestow. I'd volunteer for the committee also.
Okay, so we have 2 for Central.
This is John Sanders. I'll volunteer for the committee.
So where are the meetings held?
Where are the meetings held, Samir? Well, these are.
They're held. They'll be held by phone, or Zoom perhaps. But basically, yeah, it should be easy to not in person.
So it's really not a meeting. It's a conversation or an interview.
It's an interview process, yeah, to help get that recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 2 in the Central, 1
excuse me, through the chair, I'm from Tulare, so I'm in the southern zone.
Yeah, so I just want to remind you, so Tulare and Kern counties are in the southern region.
Okay.
And so we had, Mr. Treestow here in the Fresno office is volunteers. I think him and John Sanders cover the 2 for the southern region. We have 1 volunteer for Central, and then you'll need 1 more, and then the 2 from the north.
Okay. Anybody in the Central want to volunteer? 1 more person?
I'll volunteer. Patricia Matthews.
Okay, we have 2. How about here in the north? All right, I'll volunteer. And Phoebe? We have 2 in the north. Biggie.
All right, thank you.
Okay. You'll arrange the interviews of the contacts?
Through the chair, this is Katrina. I will contact everybody that's volunteered and set up the phone conference and send out information.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to 12.
All right. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning. I'm joined by Emily Nealon, Program Manager, and Sylvia Vanderspeck from CARB will also be on here to provide a few slides, giving you an update on where we are in developing this revised plan for the 2012 annual PM 2.5 standard. So as you know, we have a lot of challenges against us here in the Valley for air quality. Our geography and topography are working against us. We often have weather conditions that place a lid over the bowl of the valley. We have a lot of transportation movement throughout the region, like we've already talked about a lot this morning. Wildfires, population growth, pollution transport from other areas, drought at different periods. So lots of challenges that we face. And because of that, we have to reduce our emissions even further than other regions to meet the same air quality standards. And we've been working at this for a number of decades. In this image here you see, and in the boardrooms that we meet in, you can see how much has changed in the reduction of NOx emissions over time. From 1980 through 2023, you can see a huge change here with about a 93% reduction in stationary source NOx emissions. And this is really the cornerstone of our ozone and PM planning strategies, where NOx emissions can help reduce both ozone and particulate matter. So this has been really important for us. In addition to what we do here locally, CARB has adopted numerous mobile source emissions control measures. We have very difficult and challenging conditions against us, so we have to be very tough with our strategies. We complement that with our incentive programs here, where over $6.2 billion have been invested over time in incentives throughout the region. And with all of this effort that we're making, we're continuing to see improvements in air quality. I wanted to mention too that for this plan, we're working on this plan for the 2012 annual PM 2.5 standard. Scientific research has been a real foundation for this and other planning efforts. The study agency that's been in place here for a long time. This is a partnership between EPA, CARB, various air districts throughout the region. Stakeholders have worked together to raise funding and support a number of very important research projects that we list here on the slide. And this has really set the foundation for how we're going to reduce ozone, reduce PM 2.5 throughout the region and keep making that progress. Through these efforts, about $60 million have been invested and spent on research, which has really helped chart the path forward on the progress that we've seen so far and where we're going to go in the future. And the strategy we have in place for our air quality efforts, there's a lot of different components to this. Our regulatory measures that we've talked about a number of times with you, our incentive-based programs has been really key. And on the state side, the mobile source strategy to reduce emissions from trucks and vehicles is very important. All of it goes along with public education and outreach to get the word out about what people can do to reduce their activities and reduce emissions, pushing the advancement of technology to zero emission technologies, and working with the EPA to get emissions reductions from sources that's under their jurisdiction, under federal jurisdiction. All of this together forms our emission reduction strategy for the Valley. And this is showing that this is all reflecting in air quality progress we're seeing over time. And this is for PM 2.5 specifically looking at the entire calendar year. And the red part of the donut for each of these years, those are the days during the year that we are exceeding the daily PM 2.5 standard. So going back in time on the left-hand side, in the year 2002, about 20% of the days were exceeding that daily standard. And you can see as we go forward in time all the way to last year, which was a great year for us, only 2% of the days during the calendar year are we exceeding that federal standard. 98% of the days across the Valley's counties were meeting that. So we still need to chop down that 2%, get rid of those peak days, but clearly a lot has changed here over the decades, showing the effectiveness of all of our efforts together. And looking specifically at just the peak annual average, this plan that we're working on is related to the annual average. So looking at just the year 2023, which is on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see how much lower it is compared to where we were in the past. In 2002, our peak annual average for the Valley was close to 25 micrograms, and now we're between 13 and 14. So this is a big deal for an annual average. To move it this much, this reflects a lot of effort and success in reducing our concentrations throughout the region. And finally, before I pass it to Emily, just wanted to note here too that we're seeing progress not only for our peak concentrations, but looking at all the different areas of the San Joaquin Valley at the air monitoring stations, we're seeing continued progress. You can see along the bottom of this slide here the names of the different locations where we have our air monitoring sites. At the very top, that's just the single year 2023 average for PM 2.5, and we have a number of dashed lines there showing the various annual standards that are in place that EPA has established. The 15 microgram, the 12 microgram, and the 9 microgram that was established this year. This plan that we're working on is specific to the 12 microgram standard, that middle gray dashed line there. And you can see up in the year 2023, the majority of our sites are below 12. We just have a few more that we need to continue to make progress to get below 12. Down below, that's what's called the design value, a 3-year average of 3 different years. And so this is the official metric that we have to use when we determine if we're in attainment. So over the past 3 years, it shows that we do still have some sites below 12, but we have some others we need to continue to progress and make improvements to get all of the areas below 12 micrograms, which is what this plan is addressing. And at this point, I'll pass it to Emily to give us some more details of the components of this plan.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And good morning, Mr. Chair and your board. So we're here today to talk about our revised plan for the 2012 annual PM 2.5 standard. EPA established the standard in 2013 at the level of 12 micrograms per cubic meter. We were initially designated as moderate non-attainment of the standard in 2015. We subsequently submitted our 2016 PM 2.5 plan, which included a request to be reclassified to serious non-attainment due to our air quality challenges. EPA approved this moderate plan and reclassified the district to serious non-attainment in December of 2021, which set forward a timeline for when our serious non-attainment plan would be due. Initially, we had adopted the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, which included addressing requirements for this standard earlier than required. EPA had proposed full approval of this plan in December of 2021, but following that, they reversed their decision and proposed disapproval in October of 2022. In response to this, CARB withdrew the plan with district concurrence in October of 2022. So since then, we've been working diligently with CARB to put together this revised plan. This plan relies on the 2018 PM 2.5 plan and includes revisions incorporating latest guidance, feedback from EPA and their latest proposals, public comments, and it also addresses the necessary Clean Air Act requirements. In October of 2023, the District Governing Board adopted some initial plan elements and submitted this package to EPA in November of last year. So those boxes you see with the check mark, that was included in the initial elements that were already submitted. So this included our precursor demonstration showing which precursors are significant to the formation of PM 2.5 in the valley, requirements for major sources through permitting, emissions inventory, and a best available control measure analysis demonstrating the stringency of our rules and regulations. The remaining elements are going to be addressed through this plan that we're going to be discussing here today. So the attainment strategy within the plan, that's kind of the focus of the presentation this morning. It includes a comprehensive suite of both regulatory and incentive-based measures, along with other things included in our overall emission reduction strategy that John mentioned a few slides ago. The gold standard of our attainment strategy is really the adopted rules and regulations that are already in place, achieving reductions into the future by both the district and CARB. And these adopted measures are achieving 10.1 tons per day in PM 2.5 reductions and 128 tons per day in NOx reductions through 2030, which is our attainment year for this plan. Just wanted to highlight some of the adopted regulations that are specifically achieving reductions after the base year of this plan, which is 2017. I will note that there's a number of additional district regulations that are in place. They've been in place for a number of years that are achieving reductions into the future. These are the ones that have implementation timeframes within the plan period specifically. But like I mentioned, these are really the gold standard and the foundation of our plan, as these reductions are already being achieved or will be achieved through rules that are already adopted by the District Governing Board. The plan also includes some additional proposed measures, both regulatory and incentive-based, to achieve additional reductions. Specifically, Rule 4550, Conservation Management Practices, Rule 4901, wood-burning fireplaces and wood-burning heaters. And then on the incentive side, we have our fireplace and wood stove changeout program and our low dust nut harvester replacement program. For CMPs, Rule 4550, this rule has been in place for a number of years, achieving reductions through the reduction of passes of ag equipment and implementation of other conservation practices such as cover cropping, reduced passes through conservation tillage, things like that. So we are going to continue our robust rule development process that is ongoing to evaluate opportunities to reduce emissions from fallowed land, collaborating with industry stakeholders, USDA, NRCS, and other agencies to achieve some further reductions from this category. For our fireplace rule, we have had this rule in place for a number of years. Most recently in 2019, as part of commitments in the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, we adopted lower wood burning curtailment levels in the rule, in addition to other enhancements that were adopted. We also operate our incentive program. We have robust public education and outreach, enforcement, as well as air quality forecasting programs in place already. Through this plan, we're proposing a commitment to further reduce emissions from this category by extending the wood burning season through March. It currently goes through the end of February, so we would be adding an additional month to their curtailments. On the incentive side, we would be committing to quantify and request credit for reductions achieved through our wood-burning fireplace changeout program through 2026. And then for low dust nut harvester, we do have $25 million of secured funding in-house through our existing budget and grants that we've received. So we would be committing to accelerate the deployment of cleaner technologies, specifically for low dust nut harvesting here in the Valley through that funding. We also have a number of innovative further study measures to further evaluate through the time period of this plan through 2030 for things like residential and commercial heating, so building decarbonization, commercial charbroiling. We've continued to look at this through the years. We'll continue to work on this through a recently developed charbroiler collaborative work group, stationary source NOx and PM measures, looking to evaluate the feasibility and potential of emerging technologies as they become available. energy and climate change programs, opportunities to gain co-benefits from these programs, as well as future programs, clean landscaping equipment and strategies to work with landscaping services, local jurisdictions, as well as deploying zero emissions equipment here in the Valley. And then lastly, other innovative measures to continue to evaluate any out-of-the-box measures that may become available in the future to pursue additional reductions as technologies, practices, and policies evolve. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sylvia Vanderbeck at CARB to talk about the state SIP strategy.
And Sylvia, before you jump in, I just wanted to, Mr. Chair, just add that, you know, the way, just to give you, again, a quick reminder, the way these plans are developed is actually a partnership with CARB. So we do what we can under our local measures, and Emily just walked through different things that are happening there. CARB also has not only the mobile source strategy, but they play a huge role in actually doing the modeling. There's some key elements of the plan. And so we ultimately adopt the plan at the local level, and then it actually goes to CARB for their consideration. And so this whole time that the plan's been developed, and as you've heard through, I don't even know how many updates now to the CAC, as it's worked its way through, there's really two kind of halves to the plan. One is the district, and then CARB is the other half. And so I want to introduce Sylvia, who's been working on these plans for a very long time with us. Many years that we've had experience with her and her team in co-developing these plans, and just wanted to just quickly introduce Sylvia and her key role in basically helping put together approvable plans so that we can satisfy the Federal Clean Air Act. Otherwise, there's some major consequences if we don't. So with that, Sylvia, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samira, and good morning, Mr. Chair and everyone on the CAC. So I'm just going to quickly highlight the CARB strategy that's part of this plan and provide the results of the attainment demonstration. And so CARB developed the 2022 state strategy. We took a look at this state strategy to see what measures provide reductions in a timely manner for attainment in the San Joaquin Valley. And so this strategy was adopted in September 2022. It sets the pace and scale of CARB's rulemaking through this next decade, and we did identify some measures that provide for attainment. Next slide, please. So this table here, first of all, what I'd like to say is that when CARB has an emission reduction commitment and a SIP, it's a two-part commitment. We select some measures that we think that we can adopt that provides for emission reductions, and then the second is that we have an aggregate commitment. So this table and chart of measures here are measures that provide emission reductions in the time frame that the Valley needs to provide healthy air. When you look at this list, some of these measures have already been adopted, like the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation and the in-use locomotive regulation, while others are still in the process of being developed, such as a zero emission standard for space and water heaters. And we're working closely with your local district here on those measures. Next slide, please. I want to highlight here that one of the things, as Emily mentioned earlier, this plan isn't just about new measures. It's about, CARB and the district's ongoing programs to provide significant emission reductions in the 2030 timeframe. And so what this chart shows is that from 2017 to 2030, CARB's existing control program provides for 115 tons per day of NOx emissions. And then the control strategy selected from the 2022 state SIP strategy provides another 20 tons per day of reductions. And combined with the district, this provides for attainment in the Valley in 2030. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, CARB has a two-part commitment, committing to the measures. And part of that commitment for the measures is a schedule. And so this chart here shows you the schedule of CARB's measure commitment that's going to be included in this SIP. Again, the purple stars highlight things that have already been adopted, and the gold stars show the ones that are still need to be adopted by the CARB board. As you can see, we've got an extensive rulemaking calendar. The blue boxes highlight when these are going to be implemented. And so the CARB board is going to be very busy over the next couple of years, providing reductions, not only for the San Joaquin Valley, but for the rest of the state. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there was a list of those measures that have already been adopted, and that's, very critical that these are providing early emission reductions. Some of these reductions are happening right now. And so from these already adopted measures, out of that 20 tons, 12.9 comes from the already adopted measure for NOx emissions, and then 0.5 of directly emitted PM also come from recently adopted CARB measures. Next slide, please. So one of the things is when you're working on developing an attainment plan, CARB worked very closely with the Air District. And so preliminary modeling indicated we needed some more reductions. And so the San Joaquin Valley ag stakeholders have done really a great job. Back in 2018, as part of that SIP, they committed to achieve 11 and 10 tons per day of NOx in 2024 and 2025. And last fall, they achieved those tons. So what we decided is that we would take credit for those in 2030. So we'll be augmenting the ag incentive measure that CARB has already adopted and quantifying the emission reductions in 2030. As you can see in the slide, it has been very successful. The ag industry has turned over and destroyed over 12,800 pieces of older ag equipment, of which 7,300 of those were the dirtiest, most uncontrolled. And as was mentioned earlier, in the San Joaquin Valley, the ag equipment incentive program has been very successful. And that was a very interesting commercial that we saw from the tractor trade-up program. So for right now, we are including a commitment in 2030, and the projects that are going to be included in the commitment will still need to be EPA SIP creditable measures. And so it will just be a subset of those. So in 2030, what CARB staff plan to do is we will do a retrospective to look at the projects that meet those requirements and submit that to EPA. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, part of the commitment is, the measures, and then the second part is the aggregate commitment. So CARB will be making an aggregate commitment of 7.3 tons per day of NOx and 1.6 tons per day of PM 2.5, in the valley, and submitting that to EPA. And once EPA approves this commitment, it will become federally enforceable. Next slide, please. So actually, this is the most important slide of all, because this shows you the efforts and what the results are going to be. So as you can see, in the base year, we were at, the air quality was at 16.97 at Bakersfield Plants, which is the high site. And then with the control strategy, and that includes the district extending the residential wood burning curtailment to March, the ag incentive projects, we're now below 12 at 11.98. But I think what's important to highlight here is that while Bakersfield Plants is the high site and is predicted to be the last to reach attainment in 2030, many of the other sites across the valley will be reaching attainment much earlier than 2030 along the way. And, if you really take a look at the numbers here, 6 out of those 17 sites in 2030 already meet the new 9 microgram standard. And so as you can see, the valley is making good progress towards meeting these standards. So I will now pass it back to John and Emily.
Perfect. Thanks, Sylvia, for that update. So today you've heard a lot about what the district and CARB are doing in partnership to get the valley into attainment by 2030. It's very important to note that we're continuing to advocate to EPA that they need to do their fair share in reducing emissions under federal jurisdiction. specifically emissions from heavy-duty trucks, locomotives, and other mobile sources that the district and CARB do not have authority over. So we continue to advocate for both state and federal action, as well as pursue additional funding opportunities for our grant programs here in the Valley to accelerate these reductions from mobile sources. Just wanted to quickly touch on the public process for the plan. We've had multiple opportunities for public and stakeholders to offer their feedback through multiple public workshops. The most recent was held on April 29th. I know a few of you attended and provided comments, so thank you so much for your participation. Workshop materials were provided in both English and Spanish, with simultaneous Spanish interpretation provided. We also provided ongoing presentations to the District Governing Board, your Citizens Advisory Committee, as well as the Environmental Justice Advisory Group throughout the development of this plan. We did notice our public workshops through our stakeholder listservs, including regulated entities, 8617 communities, and other individuals who have signed up for these email notifications. We have a dedicated plan for the webpage, and then the public will still have additional opportunities for involvement through the remainder of this public process for the plan until we take this to the governing board, as well as involvement as individual strategies, programs, and regulations are developed over the coming years. For our next steps for the plan, we published draft sections of the plan on April 26th ahead of our public workshop on the 29th. We are working to incorporate public comments as they're received throughout the remainder of the plan as appropriate. We plan to publish the proposed plan in its entirety on May 21st ahead of the June governing board hearing. And lastly, just wanted to note that we encourage you to continue sending this information to your respective interest group constituents. We're also looking for additional suggestions and input throughout the remaining portion of this public process. And then we'll have a tentative item for an update and potential recommendation by the CAC at the upcoming June CAC meeting. So with that, would love to have some discussion. Thank you.
Any comments from Modesto? Questions? Bakersfield, questions, comments? Fresno?
Just one real quick comment, this manual. Thank you, Emily, you and John, Samir, the entire team, and everybody working in collaboration. I mean, that's what it's about. I want to thank you for the report. I think your extreme non-attainment days from a 19 to a 2%, what an accomplishment, just like the wall. I mean, a lot of hard work and a lot of cost and a lot of commitment by businesses, rural communities, our cities, our mayors, and everybody. But thank you very much for the report. I think it was great. The last workshop you had, the staff did a great job walking through each of the slides. I think having it at 5 o'clock was, I think, a good time for people that couldn't make it during the working day. So I think that was a great opportunity for the folks. But Samir, your entire team and board, thank you. We look forward to making this happen on June. Thank you.
Any other comments? Are there any public comments?
Do we have any public comments in Bakersfield on this item?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Modesto that would like to comment?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? Seeing none and none online.
All right. Thank you all for that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to suggest that item number 11, I mean, it is in the package, but we could continue the presentation on that item until the June meeting. And we'll talk about that in terms of what other items may be on that agenda, but we'd be happy to make that presentation at the next meeting.
Okay, I think we're good with that. How about item 13?
I do see Jess Olson here, our Director of Community Strategy and Resources. She can do a very quick update, and I believe Carb is also on the line.
Carb should also be on the
we'll
line.
do the rapid, accelerated version of this to try to, get you out of here as soon as we can.
All right.
I can do that. Good afternoon in like 10 seconds. Jessica Olson, Director of Community Strategies and Resources. 3 quick updates on just some upcoming events for the AB 617 communities that we work in. We have an in-person meeting tomorrow night in Fresno. It wraps up sort of the 4 communities that we have. We've been trying to do in-person meetings at least once a year. So that meeting is happening tomorrow night, certainly in partnership with all of our agency partners, business partners, community members, and community leaders. So we look forward to that interaction. And we also have 2 upcoming events in 2 other communities. Both of them are lawnmower exchange events where folks can bring in old gas-powered lawnmowers and exchange them for free electric mowers in person. That's May 23rd in Stockton and June 6th in Arvin, Lamont. And so that's serving just a completion of 2 different CERP measures in both of those communities. And that's our Community Emissions Reduction Program, which is what I said, CERP. I need to stop using acronyms. Other than that, those are kind of my quick updates for upcoming meetings. But I will pass it to Brian Moore. He's with CARB and he has a few updates for you as well.
Cool, thanks, Jess. Yeah, this is Brian from CARB's Office of Community Air Protection. I just have one update. We will be giving our annual Community Air Protection Program update to our CARB board on July 25th, starting around 4 p.m. And the notice should be produced really shortly. So I'll definitely share that with the Air District to get to you all, and we can we discuss it next month. So thanks.
Okay. Samira, is there a flyer or something on the free lawnmower thing in Stockton?
I believe I'm seeing nods, so we can actually share that information via email, so you can help get the word out. Appreciate it.
Okay, item 14. Jamie.
Just really quickly, it's Jamie. Most of what we've been up to has already been mentioned by Samir, Jessica, or earlier in the day. Thanks to all of you who came out and saw us at events, though. We've been super busy with events. Next week's Bike to Work week, so I expect all of you to get on your bikes and be bicycle riding wherever you might to your workplace. Thanks. I keep it quick because we're running late.
Wow, that was quick. All right, CAC member comments. Let's start with Bakersfield. Any comments? Okay, Fresno?
This is Dennis Tristo. I have a comment, and maybe the district can expand on this, but there was a notice out that the certified air permitting professional will be having a training course coming up, and it's registration. One who they can register to determine their qualifications and participate in that. So any further, I don't want to miss out on anything of this, but
I apologize. I don't have the exact date of the meeting. We can send it out to the group. But yeah, that's a program that we operate here at the district where consultants and facility operators and others who have experience in applying for and processing air pollution permits can go through a process we have to receive training and a registration with us, and that can help facilitate future permitting actions for applicants, and they could submit those on the behalf of future applicants to help streamline the process. So,
and I'll represent to my colleagues that it's an excellent program, and it's been instituted by the Air District since shortly after its inception, when it was included within the legislation that formed the Air District. So when everyone's knowledgeable and the permits are submitted in complete, it's an advantage for business and advantage for the air quality in the valley.
So I just got a text message. It's June 25th and 26th.
Okay.
That'll be out. So someone's listening.
Mr. Chairman, this is Manuel. I just want to thank you for your role in working and communicating with the California Resources Board with our district. I think today was a very good discussionable meeting. Yes, it took a lot of time, but I think members that I really appreciate the comments from the CAC members today on that item, but thank you for following through professionally and bringing it to us so we can have that dialogue. So I thank you very much for your hard work and efforts as the chair of this CAC, and it's important for its members. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Pedestro, comments? All right. Anybody want to volunteer to present the report during the governing board meeting?
Mr. Chair, if I could just jump in really quick on this one to let you know. So at the May 16th, which is next week, we'll have our public hearing on our budget. We will not actually have a regularly scheduled hearing. Our next board meeting will actually be in June. So I just wanted to note that. No, you're more than welcome to come to listen into the budget presentation. It's a public comment hearing, but there will be no CAC item on that agenda, and the next one actually will be at the June meeting. So and we'll have a June, hopefully, assuming it's June CAC meeting before that board meeting, so we can talk about that at that next meeting in terms of volunteering for that June meeting.
Okay, thank you, Samir. Only 5 minutes behind. All right, unless there's something else, I adjourn the meeting.